Thank you for staying with us on Radio IKIM, Inspirasi Inforia Islami. And Alhamdulillah, welcome back to the third season of Radio IKIM program, Great Words of the Muslim World. And inshallah, today we are having yang berbahagia Dr. Muhammad Husni Muhammad Amin, Fellow Center for Science and Environment IKIM. And Assalamualaikum, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah, how are you
Hajjah.
today?
Alhamdulillah. I hope
Yeah.
you are good too.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Doctor. And
Yes.
also thank you for being with us today, Doctor.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, and as for today, we will discuss on Ta'lim al-Muta'allim,
Yes.
Az-Zarnuji's Guide for the Seekers of Knowledge. And Ta'lim al-Muta'allim is written by Burhanuddin Az-Zarnuji, right?
Yes.
And perhaps, Dr. Sni, you can explain who is Burhanuddin Az-Zarnuji and how would you describe his milia?
All right. Alhamdulillahirabbil A'udzubillahiminasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabihi ajma'in. Yes, yeah, I'm so happy that we are back with season 3
Yes.
of Great Works of the Muslim World. And so for this season, I thought of starting off with this figure and his book. He is Burhanuddin Az-Zarnuji, and his book is Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, Tariq Ta'allum. So Burhanuddin Az-Zarnuji was a scholar who lived in the 12th century, and not much is known about his background other than he was a scholar, a prolific one, not a prolific one, but he was also a traditionist, and he learned under illustrious teachers. That's what we know about him. And even his name Burhanuddin, which we can translate it to as the proof of Islam, or the demonstration of Islam, was an agnomen or moniker, not a real name. And there are several opinions on what his real name was, but they couldn't settle on that. But it is because of his nisbah Az-Zarnuji that people thought he was from the town of Zarnuj, and it was a well-known town near River Oxus in what is now within the state of Turkestan. I mean, the western region of Kazakhstan. And Zarnuji was known to have studied, as I said, under several illustrious Hanafi scholars, including Sheikh Ali ibn Abu Bakr al-Marghiyani al-Rushdani from Samarkand, which is now in Uzbekistan. And we have a MOU with Uzbekistan to conduct programs with them, learning and scientific civilizational sort of programs. And also he identified also another scholar by the name of Burhanuddin Ali ibn Abu Bakr al-Farghani al-Marghinani, who is the author of the Hanafi textbook on jurisprudence entitled Al-Hidayah. Al-Hidayah. So this is a compendium of Hanafi fiqh. And you see the distance between the two places from Farghan in the east to Samarkand is about to the west is about one is in now what we know today as Kazakhstan, the other one is in Uzbekistan. The distance when we look up in Google Maps, it's about 553 kilometers. So you got to imagine how such a person as Burhanuddin Zarnuji must have traveled in order to learn from both scholars. So they travel a lot during that time. You know, Imam Bukhari even who compiled the Sahih collection of Bukhari, he used to travel a lot too, to collect the hadith. And so Az-Zarnuji, people thought that speaking of which, people thought that Al-Zarnuji died in Bukhara
Mhm.
around 620 Hijrah, coinciding with 123 1000 1223 of the Gregorian calendar.
Mhm.
And with regards to his milieu, uh, in the beginning of his life, he was born in 1144, as I've said before. Uh, that was the time when the first crusade was ending with the Crusader victory in conquering Baitul Maqdis,
Mhm.
Jerusalem. And just as the Muslim were launching their counterattack in 1125, when Imaduddin Zangi uh, uh, attacked south of Syria to regain lands lost to the Crusaders.
Yeah.
And then he died, and then his son Nuruddin Zangi took up the mantle of jihad to fight against the Crusader, and this began in 1145, so 1 year after Zarnuji was born. And it was within that period of time of 40
Mm.
years that they fought on and to recover the lands. And by 1187 was the time when Salahuddin al-Ayyubi
Mm.
managed to recover Baitul Maqdis. And towards the end of Zanurji's life, uh, during that time, An-Nasir Lidinillah was the caliph of the Abbasid dynasty. But after Zanurji died in 1223, then Nasir died in 1225. And the situation during that time was it was the conclusion of the Third Crusade.
Mhm.
You remember that 1193 was the time when Richard the Lionheart came from
Mhm.
England to continue the crusade against Salahuddin. And 1194, if I'm not mistaken, Salahuddin died. And Richard, he didn't manage to get back Jerusalem, and then he returned to England. But a new threat was emerging from the east. Uh, some people, question why didn't Khalif al-Nasir help
Mhm.
Salahuddin with the war efforts. The truth is that he was busy with his own problems.
Yeah.
His seat of power was in Baghdad,
Mhm.
and the city was quite, shall we say, overrun by groups that were called the Ayyarun, or street gangs.
Mhm.
But due to the activities of the Sufis there, they recruited these people, and they created order called the Futuwah. And in this order, these people contributed their time and energy reforming themselves, and then they volunteered with the war efforts. But Al-Nasir, he was busy, contending with another threat, which is the Mongol emerging from Mongolia. They're moving westward towards Muslim land. So that's a little bit about Burhanuddin Zarunji, and
Mhm.
was the situation of his time.
Yeah, it was quite struggle for them, right?
Yes,
And also quite interesting when you mention how he traveled from two different, I mean, a long, far, very very far
yeah.
distance
Yeah, the
to
distance
collect.
is like from Johor Bahru
Yeah,
to Thailand to
yeah,
Narathiwat.
yeah,
Almost
correct.
that distance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also we mentioned about Ta'lim al-Muta'allim. So
Yes.
maybe perhaps you can explain what is his book all about.
Yeah. So this book, Ta'lim Muta'allim, we can translate as the instruction to the students, the way or method of learning. So it is a treatise on educational etiquette and ethics. So it's a treatise on akhlaq,
Mm-hmm.
which was widely circulated, therefore popular among Muslim educators. So even though Zanuji managed to write this is his only one book that is widely known because of the content, and other works were lost, and some even said that this some of his other works were lost when the Mongol sacked Baghdad and destroyed uh, Baitul Hikmah, the massive library there
Mhm.
in 1258. So this is the only book, only work of Zarnuji that survived the passage of time, and we know that due to the large number of surviving manuscripts of this book, then from there we know that it was popular, plus some other testimonials by the earlier scholar educators. And in this book, Zanuji elaborates extensively concerning the physical and mental conditions necessary for a successful study, for manner of instruction, attitudes to written and spoken word, and especially the ideal character of the student teacher relationship. So this is a book on pedagogy, and how learning is to be carried out, and also how learning should take place. And Zarnuji himself, he divided the book into 13 chapters, and you can find nowadays, you can find at least two translations in English.
Mhm.
I think one of them was done by Sheikh Dr. Hamza Yusuf of the Zaituna uh, College, uh, method of instruction
Mhm.
to students, and the other one is compiled where it forms the a chapter in this book that I have with me, Classical Foundation of Islamic Educational Thought, uh, compiled by Bradley J. Cook and published by Brigham Young University, and has a nice gloss to it. And so the 13 chapters that we can find talks about the nature and merit of knowledge and study. So Islam has a good uh, view towards learning and knowledge. And knowledge is something that is viewed highly and regarded as noble. Uh, in fact, there's a hadith in the collection of Ibn Majah. It says that talibul ilm faridatun ala kulil muslim, meaning the seeking of knowledge, seeking out knowledge is a is an obligation upon every Muslim. So this is in Majah, and and there are many other exhortation. Even in the Quran says the person who is learned is not the same as people who are ignorant,
Yeah.
and people who have knowledge, they occupy degree higher
Mhm.
than people without knowledge. And people, Allah raise the degrees, the station of people with knowledge. But most importantly, which forms the emphasis in Zarnuji's book, is the purpose of study. Is every knowledge uh, worthwhile pursuing? What about knowledge of the evil kind,
Mhm.
such as sorcery or even astrology, the science of predicting people's fates?
Mhm.
Are these knowledge which we can learn?
Yeah.
So he discusses this in this book. So, and chapter 3, he talks about the student's choice of subject, the teacher and the student associates, and the continued companionship. So he talks about and then in chapter 4 he talks about respecting knowledge and those who possess it. So with regards to choosing teacher, he says, you cannot
Simply
simply choose, I mean, jump from one
yeah.
teacher to another. He says at least you have to spend at least 2 months, under a teacher, and gauge
Mhm.
how is that benefiting you. So and with regard to respecting knowledge and those who possess it, so it's kind of you shouldn't, make the teacher from whom you are learning feel slighted by your
Yeah.
own behavior and actions, because this is a person who will impart upon
Yeah.
you knowledge. Today, it's almost, people don't think about this. They jump from one
Correct.
teacher to
Yeah.
another, hoping to benefit from as many
Yeah.
people as possible.
Yes.
But in fact, when they do that, and if the knowledge, the information of that got to be revealed ataupun or conveyed to the other
Yeah.
teacher, he might feel slighted because of that, and because of that his teaching, the degree of his teaching might be reduced, and this
Yeah.
will be this benefit for the student.
Yeah. In fact, we cannot call it learning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a process.
Yeah, so it's a kind of, I don't know, maybe touch and go type
Yeah.
of, toll type of thing.
Yeah.
So uh so it's in fact beneficial for the students, and of his interest, that he should honor
Mm-hmm.
the people. I mean, you can read up, books, and find out
Yeah.
more about the teachers, and then stay a while with the
Yeah.
teacher, and then make a decision whether to continue pursue knowledge under him,
Mm.
or find somebody. But within that regard,
Yeah.
Zarnuji also remind us that we have a finite amount of time, and then
Mm-hmm.
we don't live forever. So it's important for the students to know, to bear this in mind also, to select properly, but not to spend too much time on
Mm-hmm.
sticking on the decision to stick to one teacher. And number 5, chapter 5, I talk about undertaking the study itself, how what are the methods and how to organize the study, and then the time for acquisition of knowledge, which must happen at a very young age. Nowadays, people neglect,
Yeah.
religious studies, and for the sake of, accumulating
Mm.
wealth, and building their livelihood, and so they put aside the learning of religious knowledge until they retire, and then that's the time that they want to use to learn fardu ain and fardu kifayah. But at that time, most of us, we have already expended our energy. We are getting old, and we have no more energy to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So we benefit only little, when as compared to the time when we have most energy, and we can devote much of our time in learning. And next, he talks about helping and counseling others. What sort of, and then he gives a lot of shi'r, or Arab poetry in his
Poetry.
book. This reflects much of his linguistic and memory skills, and he talks about the ethics of learning. For example, on the purpose of study, he says, an immoral man of learning is a great evil, but a greater evil still is an ignoramus leading a godly life. Also, he talks about people who are actually ignorant, but they think they are knowledgeable. So there's a term to this, which is called jahil murakkab, people who are actually ignorant, and they don't want to learn from others, and they
Mm.
act as if they are
Yeah.
knowledgeable. They are the ones who, they create havoc, and
Mm-hmm.
they spread ignorance and cause things to fall out of place.
Yeah.
And next, he talks about the means which promote attainment of knowledge. Yeah. Again, reiterating, for example, he then introduces a poem by Sayyidina Ali, ala la tanalul ilm illa bisittah, uh, sa'abnika an majmu'iha bibayan, zaka'un wa hirsun wa istibarun wa bulghah wa irshad ustadhi wa tulu zaman. So he said that Sayyidina Ali said that in order to attain knowledge, you need several things. He said the pursuit of knowledge is not carried on without 6 things. These are prerequisites to attaining knowledge, which Sayyidina Ali says, shall indicate to you through words that are clear. Ingenious acumen, meaning intelligence. You have to
Yeah.
be intelligent in order to pursue knowledge. Fervent desire. You must have an ambition for
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. Patience, sufficient sustenance. You have to have money to pay off fees and also your own sustenance, guidance of a teacher, and you have to have length of time. That's why now it's quite common to have the diploma or bachelor degree
Yes,
program
correct.
to have 5 years, and then
Mm-hmm.
go to a master's 2.5 years or 3 years,
Yes,
and maybe a PhD for 5 years. So you need a lot of time,
correct.
and studying is not an easy matter.
Correct.
Uh, Nowadays we have concepts such as graduate on time, GOT, as if these things can be completed easily.
Easily, yeah.
So I don't know, maybe because of that we have people whom the industry will later complain that they are incompetent because they
Yes.
haven't spent really
Mm-hmm.
good time studying and
Yeah.
acquiring knowledge. And also coming to the ninth sorry, the 11th chapter of the book is abstinence from evil during pursuit of learning. We are reminded of I think Imam Shafi'i is saying that knowledge is light, and if the heart is covered in the sins of evil,
Mm-hmm.
then this light cannot penetrate it,
Yeah.
so the person remains unenlightened.
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and then he gives on some tips to what creates memory and what brings about forgetfulness. So when the students know these things, they know uh, the things that they should do or consume in order to strengthen
Yeah.
memory so that they can learn better. Some of the things like don't eat things which are sour, don't look at ugly things, don't look at uncovered women,
Mm-hmm.
and then eat consume dates or even raisins to increase memory, and then participate in worship, pray always, and go read books as often as you can. And then the 13th chapter, he closes off with factors which promote or prevent earning of livelihood, and those who prolong or diminish one's longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And these include simple tips like don't eat certain types of seeds, because and then don't pass through line of camels.
Yeah.
At first glance you see this is as if folklore, or I mean some superstition, but
Yes.
there's a rationale behind this. For example, Abu Bakr Muhammad al-Razi,
Mm-hmm.
the great medicine
Mm-hmm.
man, the doctor
Yeah.
in the 10th century. He as great as he was, later on at the end, towards the end of his life, he became blind, and it was due to some say that it was due to some seeds that he was consuming while he
Mm-hmm.
was doing his experiments.
Yeah.
And the other tip that I mentioned, that Az-Zarnuji mentioned, don't pass through a line of camels, it's but because of your own safety.
Yes, correct.
Don't do that, because
Yeah.
it will shorten your life, because it's dangerous,
Yeah.
and you might get trampled. So when you die, then essentially your journey
Yeah.
in the pursuit of knowledge will be shortened.
Yeah,
So
correct.
that sort of thing that we can gather for today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it's quite interesting also, and maybe it's some kind of manual, right? How
Yeah.
to learn properly
Yes.
in a manner
Yeah.
and in morality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is very interesting. But maybe you have some
Yeah,
words.
it is right. You rightly so that it is a manual for learning. Remember that the title itself is
Yeah.
very telling. It says instruction to the students.
Yeah.
So it's aptly named, Hajjah. And then
Is
but
it?
it's not only that, because like I said earlier on, it is a book on and pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
It concerns also the teacher,
Yeah.
because he from this book he can understand the psychology of school children,
Mm-hmm.
and what sort of voice that he should be, how does he enunciate his lessons to the students, and what sort of encouragement the teacher can give to the students. But as a conclusion, we can say that according to some scholars, uh, the book has remained popular among educators because it identified several critical factors that aid or hinder learning process from the social cognitive perspective of the learner from the students, and these include influence of environment, school, home, peers and instructors. So I imagine this kind of work will be most suitable for academicians
Mm-hmm.
and also policymakers in, perhaps the education ministry. They
Yeah.
should look into this text and make it as a reference, and also the training of teachers
Mm-hmm.
in the faculty of education in universities throughout the country. And because this book outlines the proper manner of behavior of for individuals involved in the study of especially the religious sciences, and some part of it parallels the works of by Imam al-Ghazali, like Ayyuhal Walad, or even Bidayatul
Yeah.
Hidayah, and some other portions of the Ihya Ulumuddin. And I believe the important thing is that the author's concept that underlie the scheme of his treatise is that how he regards education as something uh, holistic, and and not just merely academic attainment, because this is where we uh, make a distinction between knowledge and education, ta'lim and ta'dim. Because knowledge is, in order to approach knowledge, you have to know your position.
Mm-hmm.
You are at a lower place compared to the teacher.
Yeah.
And I think there's a poem with regards to this, al-ilm. Well, it says that uh, the knowledge is enemy to the person who is haughty, who thinks highly of
Yes.
himself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like the river is enemy to the place that is high. That is high.
Mm-hmm.
He says, uh, I forgot the Arabic. I used to remember. I used to recite this in class, but the last part is. Uh,
If
he says, al-ilm adu li fatahil ali, uh, uh, kal kal sail adu lil makanil muta'ali. More or less it's like that. So that is from, I think, from one of the share in this book.
yeah,
And
it means we have to be humble to learn the knowledge, right?
yes,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that people don't overlook this
Yeah.
is has a consequence to this, which is
Mm-hmm.
why we are seeing, uh, people who are unethical coming out from
Mm-hmm.
higher educational
Yeah.
institutions. They have, advanced diplomas, advanced degrees, even they have, PhDs, but their actions, show doesn't reflect that kind of education that they are receiving. Otherwise, how else can we pinpoint, the sources of, corruption cases happening in our society? People who are highly educated, but they commit corruption, and they cut corners in their
Mm-hmm.
projects. They induce people to obtain things without right, and this cascade in the society, and it manifests as, disasters. uh, well, if you remember last time, I was here with Dr. Sheikh in our program, one
Yeah.
of our program, Man in Nature. We talked about this. So I think this work is useful in at least it can contribute to at least solving some of that problem. But Az-Zarnuji's presentation, clearly distinguishes between knowledge and education. And so knowledge is a general quality of mind while education is a learning process, and this identifies an important concept in educational psychology. And ultimately, like other educators, Az-Zarnuji is of the view that the purpose of education is ultimately to strive for God's pleasure, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remove ignorance and to ensure the survival of the religion and also its adherent.
Mhm.
So I think that sums up.
Yeah, but one thing you
Yes.
mentioned just now, this book also suitable not only at school
Yeah.
and also at home.
Yeah.
Maybe perhaps parents also want to know whether this is suitable for them to teach
Oh,
their
almost
children.
certainly, Haja. I would agree with that because, uh, well, you see here this is quite thick because it's a chapter of a compilation, but in actuality, the Arabic version is very thin, and the translation which I find most useful, the one that Sheikh Hamza Yusuf had done, uh, that is he translated in a clear and precise language. Um, I think it's most useful for parents to have. I mean, at least in order to prepare
Yes.
them for parenthood,
Yeah.
and because parents are, first and foremost, they are first teachers to their
To the
children and
children.
offsprings.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you so much, Dr. Husni, for
Most
being with
welcome.
us today
Yeah,
with the topic of Ta'alim al-Muta'allim, Az-Zarnuji's Guide for the Seekers of
of
Knowledge.
knowledge. Yes.
And we hope that this topic today and also our discussion today beneficial to all
Yeah.
listeners. And inshallah, we will come back on next week.
Inshallah,
Yeah.
next week we will have one of our. We'll try to bring one of our senior fellow at IKIM. I think I have a plan to bring Encik Asham Ahmad to
Yeah.
talk about Mizanul Amal of
Oh,
Imam Ghazali.
yeah, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
And stay tuned with us with IKIM Inspirasi Inforia Islami.